My name is Laura, and I'm 32 years old. For months, my husband told me I was overthinking everything, that my anxiety was making me paranoid, that I needed to just relax and trust him. He'd smile with such concern in his eyes, hold my hand across the dinner table, and remind me how much he loved me. But there was one morning when I found something hidden in his tie drawer that made my blood run cold, something with my name on it that I had never seen before. What I discovered next would unravel not just my marriage, but my entire identity. If you're watching this right now, drop a comment below telling me where you're from. Hit that like button, and subscribe to hear more stories about relationships that hide terrifying secrets. From the outside, Daniel and I looked like the perfect couple. Our quiet suburban home with a white picket fence, the meticulously maintained garden, the Sunday morning coffee ritual on the porch, it all screamed stability. Friends commented on how lucky we were, how calm and content we seemed. Daniel would smile at those moments, his hand finding mine across the table, squeezing gently. And I'd smile back, because that's what you do when you're supposed to be happy. But beneath that carefully constructed surface, something gnawed at me. Something I couldn't name, couldn't quite grasp. It started small. Daniel's affection felt rehearsed somehow, like lines he'd memorized for a play. The way his eyes followed me around rooms, not with desire or curiosity, but with the watchfulness of someone monitoring an experiment. I told myself I was being paranoid. Marriage changes things. People settle into routines. This was normal. Then came the mornings I couldn't explain. I'd wake disoriented, my head thick with fog that wouldn't clear even after 2 cups of coffee. The sheets would be twisted around my legs as if I'd thrashed all night, but I remembered nothing. No dreams, no midnight bathroom trips, just an unsettling void where sleep should have been. Daniel would already be dressed, smiling at me from the doorway. "Rough night," he'd ask, concern etched across his features. "You were talking in your sleep again." I never remembered talking in my sleep. I never remembered anything at all. The grogginess became routine, appearing maybe twice a week, then 3 times. I'd find myself unable to recall conversations from the night before. Had we discussed dinner plans? Had I agreed to cancel lunch with Maggie? Daniel would nod patiently when I asked, filling in the blanks with his version of events, and I had no choice but to believe him. "You're just dressed, honey," he'd say, brushing hair from my forehead. "You've been working too hard." But I hadn't been working hard at all. I'd actually scaled back my freelance projects at his suggestion. "More time to focus on us," he'd said. The tea started tasting strange around that time. Daniel had always made me chamomile before bed, a sweet gesture I'd appreciated in the early days of our marriage. But lately, some nights it had a faintly metallic undertone, almost bitter despite the honey he stirred in. When I mentioned it, he frowned. "Metallic? Maybe the kettle needs descaling. I'll take care of it." He took care of everything. That was Daniel's way. My unease deepened into something that felt like fear, though I had no concrete reason for it. So, I did what any rational person would do. I went to the doctor. Dr. Patel listened to my symptoms with professional concern. The fatigue, the memory lapses, the morning disorientation. She ordered blood work, tested for anemia, checked my thyroid, ran a hormone panel. "Everything looks normal," she said when I returned for the results. Then she paused, reviewing the printout with a slight furrow between her brows. "Though there are traces of benzodiazepines in your system. Are you taking anything for anxiety?" My stomach dropped.
No.
"Nothing. Perhaps a sleeping aid?" "These are sedatives, Laura." They'd explain the grogginess. I drove home in a daze, the lab results clutched in my shaking hand. That evening, I confronted Daniel as he chopped vegetables for dinner, the kitchen knife making precise cuts against the wooden board. "The doctor found sedatives in my blood work," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. He looked up, genuinely confused. "Sedatives?
What are you talking about?"
"Benzodiazepines," she said. Daniel set down the knife and chuckled, actually chuckled, the sound soft and patronizing. "Laura, stop Googling symptoms. You know how you get." He crossed the kitchen and placed both hands on my shoulders. "You're overthinking again. Maybe you took something and forgot?" You said yourself your memory's been fuzzy. The words were reasonable, but something in his eyes wasn't, a flicker of something cold before the warmth returned. I pulled away, clutching the lab results tighter. That night, I watched him make the tea, watched his back as he stood at the counter, heard the clink of the spoon against ceramic. When he turned and handed me the cup, his smile was gentle. Drink up. You need to rest. My instinct screamed. Everything in me recoiled from that innocent cup of chamomile. But refusing felt insane, paranoid. So I raised it to my lips and took the smallest sip possible, barely wetting my tongue. Daniel watched. He always watched. All of it, honey. It'll help you sleep. That's when I knew. The way he stood there, patient but immovable, waiting. The subtle tension in his shoulders when I hesitated. Something was very, very wrong with my husband, and I was living in a house with it, sleeping beside it every night. I forced down half the cup, then claimed I was too full. Daniel's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly before he smiled again. Okay, love. Let's get you to bed. I started keeping a journal after that, hidden in the lining of my jewelry box. Every symptom, every strange moment, every time I couldn't remember something. The entries grew darker with each passing day. What is he giving me? Why does he insist on making the tea himself? Why does he watch me drink it? When I called Maggie, my best friend since college, she listened with growing alarm. If he's controlling your sleep, Laura, that's not just weird. That's dangerous. I know. I need to be sure before I do anything drastic. Promise me you'll be careful. Promise me. Who are you talking to? Daniel's voice came from the doorway. I hadn't heard him come upstairs. Just Maggie. Girl talk. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Later, after I'd hung up, he remarked casually, "You should stop letting Maggie fill your head with nonsense. She's always been dramatic." The comment chilled me. What had he heard? When our neighbor Mrs. Chun came over the following week, I tried to test my theory. I started telling her about the strange symptoms, hoping to get an objective reaction, but Daniel smoothly interrupted. Laura's been under the weather lately. Haven't you, honey? His hand found the small of my back, the touch possessive. He steered the entire conversation from then on, all charm and easy smiles, while I sat there feeling erased. After Mrs. Chun left, Daniel turned to me with that same gentle expression. You talk too much when you're nervous. It makes people uncomfortable. A chill ran down my spine. This wasn't concern. This was control. The worst night came shortly after. I woke at 2 a.m, unable to stand, the room spinning violently. Daniel was there immediately, calm and prepared, holding a glass of water. You fainted, he explained, his voice soothing. I caught you before you hit the floor. You really need to trust me, Laura. I'm trying to take care of you. But I had no memory of fainting. No memory of getting out of bed. How long had I been unconscious? What had happened in that void? Desperate for proof, I set up my phone camera aimed at the nightstand before going to sleep. Maybe I'd catch something, him adding something to my water, tampering with something. But the next morning, the recording was corrupted, the file unreadable. My phone had somehow unplugged itself from the charger during the night. Sorry, Daniel said at breakfast. I must have knocked your cord out when I got up. You know I'm clumsy in the dark. He wasn't clumsy. Daniel was the most deliberate person I'd ever known. That's when fear truly took root. Not the ambient unease I'd been feeling, but sharp, animal terror. My marriage, which had once felt like a sanctuary, now felt like a trap. And I was running out of ways to prove I wasn't crazy. The morning Daniel left his tie drawer open changed everything. It was a Tuesday, gray and cold. He'd rushed out early for a meeting, kissing my forehead in that perfunctory way that had become routine. Don't wait up if I'm late, he'd said. The front door clicked shut, and then it was just me and the silent house. I don't know what made me go into our bedroom. Maybe intuition. Maybe just the desperate need to find something, anything, that would confirm I wasn't losing my mind. The tie drawer was slightly ajar, barely a centimeter, but Daniel was obsessive about such things. Everything in its place always. A drawer left open was a red flag, a crack in his perfect facade. My hands trembled as I pulled it wider. Neatly folded silk ties in organized columns, arranged by color. Navy, burgundy, forest green. All exactly as they should be. I almost closed it, almost walked away. But then I saw the corner of something beneath the ties on the left side. Dark velvet, too soft to be fabric. My heart hammered as I lifted the ties carefully, preserving their arrangement in case he checked. A small velvet pouch, the kind that might hold jewelry or coins. The weight of it in my palm was wrong, heavier than expected. I fumbled with the drawstring, my fingers clumsy with adrenaline. Inside, a sealed syringe and 2 small glass vials, the liquid inside clear as water. The labels bore my name, Laura Morris, and beneath that a medication name I didn't recognize, followed by the logo of our local pharmacy, Franklin's Drugs on Maple Street. For several seconds, I couldn't breathe, couldn't think. Just stared at those vials with my name on them, the syringe that wasn't for diabetes or allergies or any legitimate medical purpose I could fathom. This was in my husband's drawer, hidden beneath his ties, alongside the medication I'd never been prescribed, but that was somehow already in my system. My hands shook as I pulled out my phone and took photos from every angle. The labels, the medication name, the lot numbers. Evidence. Finally, evidence. I rewrapped everything carefully, placed it back exactly as I'd found it, rearranged the ties in their precise color-coded order. Daniel could never know I'd found this. Not yet. Not until I understood what I was dealing with. The call to Franklin's pharmacy felt surreal. I stood in the bathroom with the fan running, phone pressed to my ear, heart trying to break through my ribs. Franklin's Drugs, how can I help you? Hi, yes. I cleared my throat, forced my voice steady. This is Nurse Williams from Dr. Patel's office. I'm verifying a prescription for a patient, Laura Morris. We have some questions about the dosage. The sound of typing. Laura Morris, yes, I have that file. What do you need to know? Can you confirm the medication name? Sure, it's Rohypnol. 2.5 milligrams. The phone nearly slipped from my hand. Rohypnol. Even I knew what that was. The date rape drug, a powerful sedative that caused amnesia. The room tilted.
Mom?
Are you still there?
Yes. Sorry.
And when was this prescription filled? Let's see. Looks like it's been refilled monthly for the past 4 months. Last pickup was 2 weeks ago. For months. He'd been dosing me for 4 months. I ended the call with some excuse I don't remember, then sat on the closed toilet lid, phone clutched in both hands, trying not to vomit. The timeline matched perfectly. The grogginess, the memory blackouts, the mornings I couldn't recall, it all lined up with the nights he'd insisted I drink the tea. The nights he'd watched to make sure I finished every drop. Every creak in the house became threatening. Every shadow held danger. I found a small lock at the hardware store and installed it on the bedroom door that afternoon, my hands still shaking. That night, when Daniel came home, he noticed immediately. What's this? He gestured at the lock, his tone light but his eyes hard. I've been having trouble sleeping. I thought if I felt more secure. Secure from what, Laura? The way he asked it, not concerned, but cold, made my blood freeze. I forced a smile. Just feeling anxious. You know how I get. He stared at me for a long moment, then nodded slowly. I understand. Whatever makes you comfortable. But the next morning, I found a note on the kitchen counter in his precise handwriting. I just want you to trust me again. Then another the day after, tucked into my laptop. We used to be so good together. Remember? And another in my coat pocket. Why are you pulling away from me? The notes felt like psychological warfare. Each one a reminder that he was watching, that he knew I suspected something. When Daniel suggested couples therapy, I actually felt hopeful for a moment. Maybe a professional could see what I was seeing. Maybe I'd finally be believed. Dr. Hammond's office was all soft lighting and comfortable chairs, the kind of place meant to make you feel safe enough to be vulnerable. Daniel sat beside me, the picture of concerned husband. Laura's been very anxious lately, he began, his hand finding mine. Memory problems, paranoia. I'm worried about her. I tried to explain the sedatives in my blood work, the strange symptoms, the feeling that something was very wrong. But every time I spoke, Dr. Hammond's expression grew more pitying. "It sounds like you're experiencing significant anxiety, Laura," she said gently. "These feelings of persecution can be a symptom of—" "I'm not paranoid," I insisted. "Something is actually happening. Of course you feel that way." Her tone was the verbal equivalent of patting my hand. "Daniel, have you noticed any other concerning behaviors?" I watched, helpless, as he painted a picture of me as unstable, forgetful, increasingly irrational. Every word was perfectly calibrated, delivered with just the right amount of reluctance, as if it pained him to admit these things. Later, I'd learned he'd called ahead, primed Dr. Hammond with his version of events. But in that moment, I just felt the walls closing in. That weekend, I went through the garbage like a detective on a crime show, latex gloves on my hands, looking for anything Daniel might have thrown away. Among the coffee grounds and junk mail, I found them, empty blister packs for Rohypnol, each labeled with dates going back months. Each date corresponding to a night I couldn't remember. I photographed everything, uploaded it to a hidden cloud account, created backup after backup. But when I tried to show Maggie the next day, Daniel somehow accidentally deleted the photos while fixing a glitch on my phone. "Sorry, honey," he said, handing it back. "I think I hit the wrong button." But I cleared that malware that was slowing it down. My isolation grew tighter. Friends stopped visiting. Daniel always had an excuse for why it wasn't a good time. He took over our finances to reduce my stress, cutting off my access to our joint accounts. Every avenue of independence closed one by one until I was trapped in this beautiful house with a man who was systematically erasing me. But I wasn't beaten yet. I copied the pharmacy receipt number onto a scrap of paper and hid it inside a book Daniel would never read, a romance novel with a pink cover. I documented everything I could in a journal I kept at Maggie's house, dropped off during my increasingly rare trips out.
I needed to know why. Why was he doing this?
What was the end game? And how could I fight back without him knowing I was onto him? The answer would require me to become something I'd never been before: a good liar, a good actress, someone who could pretend everything was fine while secretly dismantling his plans from the inside. So I apologized. I found Daniel in his study, working at his laptop, the picture of casual domesticity. When I appeared in the doorway, remorseful and teary-eyed, something flickered across his face. Relief? Triumph? "I'm sorry," I said, voice breaking just enough. "You were right. I've been overthinking everything. The anxiety is making me see things that aren't there." He stood immediately, crossing to hold me. "Oh, honey, I've been so worried about you." The embrace felt like being held by something hollow, something performing humanity. But I leaned into it, let him stroke my hair, whispered my apologies into his shoulder. When he pulled back to look at my face, his smile was almost genuine. "See," he said softly, "I told you. You just need rest. We'll get through this together." I nodded, wiped my eyes, let him lead me to the couch where he made promises about fresh starts and better days. All the while, I was thinking about the vials in his drawer, the empty blister packs in the trash, the pattern of control he'd so carefully constructed. 2 days later, I found the GPS tracker. I'd been cleaning the car, something Daniel usually insisted on doing himself, but I'd volunteered, playing the role of dutiful wife trying to make amends. It was wedged under the passenger seat, about the size of a matchbox, its small light blinking green. When I looked up the serial number online, it was registered to Daniel's name through some tracking service. He'd been monitoring my movements. Every trip to the pharmacy, every visit to Maggie's, every moment I thought I was alone, he'd known exactly where I was. I left it in place. Didn't react. Just finished cleaning the car and went inside to make dinner like nothing had happened. But that night, while Daniel slept, I accessed his laptop using a password I'd watched him type weeks ago. He'd grown confident in my supposed ignorance, less careful with his digital security. In a folder titled Health Reports, I found documents that made my hands go numb. Medical assessments, psychiatric evaluations, emergency commitment papers, all bearing my forged signature. According to these files, I'd been diagnosed with severe paranoid delusions, had a history of self-harm, was a danger to myself and others. The documentation was meticulous, dated over months, building a comprehensive case for mental incompetence. In another subfolder, financial documents. Transfer papers for our house, solely in his name. Life insurance policies with him as beneficiary. Bank account authorizations that would give him sole control of everything we owned. The picture crystallized with horrible clarity. He wasn't just drugging me for control. He was building a legal framework to have me declared mentally unfit, to institutionalize me or worse, and to ensure that when I was gone, everything we had would be his alone. I took screenshots of everything, uploaded them to my hidden cloud account, the one he didn't know about. Then I cleared the browser history and closed the laptop exactly as I'd found it. That night, when he brought me my tea, I thanked him with a smile. "You always take such good care of me," I said. "Always will," he promised, watching as I raised the cup to my lips. I drank half, then excused myself to the bathroom. The liquid went down the drain in seconds, followed by me brushing my teeth to clear any residue. When I returned to bed, Daniel was already there, waiting. I climbed in beside him, kissed his cheek, and closed my eyes. "Good night, love," he whispered. I kept my breathing slow and even, body relaxed, as if already drifting off. Through barely cracked eyelids, I watched him watch me, for what felt like hours. Finally, satisfied I was asleep, he rose from the bed. The drawer opened quietly, he'd oiled the hinges. I heard the soft clink of glass, the rustle of the velvet pouch. My heart hammered so loud I was certain he'd hear it, but I kept my breathing steady, body still. He returned with something in his hand. In the dim light from the hallway, I saw the syringe, watched as he injected something into my water glass on the nightstand. Then he pulled out his phone. "She's almost ready," he said quietly into it, voice clinical. "Soon she won't remember anything. The paperwork is complete. We can move forward next week." A pause as someone responded. "No, she doesn't suspect a thing. The sedatives are working perfectly." Tears leaked from my closed eyes, hot trails down to the pillow. I couldn't move, couldn't react, had to maintain the illusion of drugged sleep. Fear mixed with rage, mixed with grief for the life I'd thought I had, the man I'd thought I'd married. When he finally returned to bed, I felt the mattress shift under his weight. His hand found mine under the covers, squeezed gently, possessively. "This is all for your own good, Laura," he whispered, so quiet I almost didn't hear it. "You'll understand eventually. Or you won't remember to question it." I lay there in the dark, every muscle tense beneath my facade of relaxation, and felt something shift inside me. The fear crystallized into something harder, colder. Resolve. My smartwatch, the one Daniel thought was broken, the one I'd secretly had repaired, had recorded everything from its position on my wrist. Every word, every movement, time-stamped and automatically backed up to my hidden cloud account. The next morning, I acted perfectly normal. Made breakfast, kissed him goodbye, asked about his day. When he returned that evening, I was warm and affectionate, the loving wife he'd worked so hard to gaslight into submission. "Feeling better?" he asked, searching my face. "Much better," I said and meant it. Because finally, I had proof. Finally, I had something concrete that couldn't be explained away or deleted or gaslit into my imagination. That night, I texted Maggie a single word. "Ready." She knew what it meant. We'd planned for this. She responded immediately, "Say when." Daniel noticed me smiling at my phone. "Good news." "Just Maggie being funny," I said. "You know how she is." He nodded, satisfied, and went back to his dinner. He had no idea that his perfect trap was about to spring on him instead. That the prey he'd been stalking had grown teeth. I just needed to time it right. Strike when he was most confident, when his guard was lowest. And I needed to do it in a way that would expose not just what he'd done to me, but the calculated pattern behind it. The countdown had begun. The next morning, I drove to Franklin's pharmacy with a purpose that steadied my shaking hands. Inside, The fluorescent lights hummed overhead as I approached the counter where a young pharmacist was organizing prescriptions. "Hi," I said, forcing my voice to sound calm. "I need some information about my prescriptions." I showed my ID, watched as she typed my name into the system. Her brow furrowed slightly. "Is there a problem, Mrs. Morris? Can you tell me who authorized the Rohypnol prescription? My doctor says it's not in her records." The pharmacist scrolled through her screen, then looked up with confusion. "Ma'am, according to our records, these prescriptions were authorized under your husband's medical power of attorney. It was filed 6 months ago." The floor seemed to tilt. Medical power of attorney? Yes, the legal document giving him authority to make medical decisions on your behalf. You would have had to sign it and have it notarized. "Can I see it?" She hesitated, then printed out a copy. There it was, my signature, perfectly replicated, notarized by someone named James Whitmore 3 days before my supposed psychological evaluation. The date on the document preceded the first memory blackout by 2 weeks. He'd been planning this long before I'd noticed anything wrong. "This is a forgery," I said quietly. "I never signed this." The pharmacist's expression shifted to alarm. "Mrs. Morris, if that's true, you need to contact the police immediately. This is a serious crime." But I'd already tried the police. 2 days ago, after securing the smartwatch footage, Maggie and I had gone to the station. We'd sat in uncomfortable plastic chairs while Officer Peterson had listened with professional courtesy and growing skepticism. "Ma'am, I understand you're concerned," he'd said. "But from what you're describing, it could just be a misunderstanding. Has he actually harmed you?" "He's been drugging me without my knowledge." "Do you have proof of intent to harm? Because if he has medical power of attorney, which I never signed, that's a civil matter. Unless you can prove he's done something criminal with clear intent, our hands are tied." "I'm sorry." Maggie had exploded. "She's showing you evidence of systematic drugging and you're saying it might be a misunderstanding." But Peterson had been unmoved. Too many what-ifs, too many alternative explanations Daniel could provide. We'd left with nothing but a case number and advice to document everything. I was documenting everything. That was the problem. I had evidence, but not enough to pierce through Daniel's careful construction of legitimacy. That evening, I checked my cloud backup to review the smartwatch footage for the 10th time, wanting to ensure every word was clear, every gesture captured. The file was gone. Not just deleted, completely removed from the server. And in the activity log, there it was, an access point from an IP address I didn't recognize, a deletion timestamped from this morning while I'd been at the pharmacy. He'd found my backup. Somehow, he'd found it and erased it remotely. I sat in my car in the pharmacy parking lot, hands gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles went white, fighting the urge to scream. He was always one step ahead. Always. That night, Daniel cooked my favorite meal, herb-crusted salmon with roasted vegetables, a dish that usually required an hour of preparation. He'd set the table with candles, opened a bottle of wine, the whole romantic dinner scene. "Let's start over," he said as we sat down, his voice gentle, his eyes watchful. "I know things have been hard, but I love you, Laura. I want us to be happy again." I forced a smile, accepted the wine glass he handed me. "I want that too." We ate in what he probably thought was companionable silence, but felt to me like the quiet before an execution. Every bite stuck in my throat. When he complimented my dress, I thanked him. When he reminisced about our early dates, I nodded and smiled. All the while, my mind was racing. Then, he mentioned something that made my blood freeze. "I called Franklin's Pharmacy today," he said casually, cutting into a salmon. "They said you were there asking questions about your prescriptions." I hadn't told him about the pharmacy visit. "Oh, I wanted to make sure everything was on file correctly." "Really?" "Because they said you seemed upset. Something about a power of attorney." He looked up, his expression concerned, but his eyes were cold. "Laura, you know you signed that. You forget things." "You're right," I said quickly. "I'm sorry. I must have forgotten." "You forget a lot of things." He reached across the table, covering my hand with his. The touch felt like a threat. "You really should rest more. You look tired." That night, I lay in bed, Daniel beside me, and felt the walls of my trap tightening. Every move I made, he countered. Every piece of evidence I gathered, he destroyed or explained away. I was running out of options and time. But I wasn't alone anymore. I'd confided everything in Maggie and her husband Tom. They believed me, had seen the footage before Daniel deleted it, knew the truth. So when I suggested a dinner party, a reconciliation dinner to celebrate Daniel and me, working through our problems, Maggie immediately understood what I was really asking. "Are you sure?" she'd said over the phone. "This is dangerous." "I'm sure. It's the only way." The dinner was set for Friday night. Daniel seemed pleased by the idea, saw it as evidence that his gaslighting was working, that I was falling back in line. I spent the days before in careful preparation, playing the perfect wife, while secretly ensuring every detail was in place. Maggie and Tom arrived at 7, bringing wine and 4 smiles. The tension in the room was palpable, but Daniel seemed oblivious, playing the gracious host. "To new beginnings," he toasted, raising his glass. We all raised ours. I watched as Daniel poured wine for everyone, noticing how he palmed something while pouring mine, the subtle movement almost invisible. When he handed me my glass, I caught Maggie's eye. She'd seen it too. "I'll just grab some water first," I said, setting the glass down. "My throat's a bit dry." I went to the kitchen, and when I returned, I picked up what I thought was my glass, but was actually Daniel's. In the confusion of multiple wine glasses on the table, I deliberately switched them while reaching for an appetizer plate. Daniel didn't notice, too focused on his performance of normalcy. We ate. We talked. Daniel was charming, self-deprecating, the perfect dinner companion. Maggie and Tom played along, though I could see the strain in their faces. 20 minutes in, Daniel reached for his wine and took a long drink. 5 minutes after that, he faltered mid-sentence, his words slurring slightly. "Sorry, I feel a bit strange." "Are you okay?" I asked, the concern in my voice almost genuine. He blinked hard, shook his head. I don't know. I feel." His hand went to his throat. The color drained from his face. Then his eyes rolled back and he collapsed forward onto the table, wine glass shattering on the floor. The room erupted. Maggie screamed. Tom jumped up, checking Daniel's pulse. I grabbed my phone, dialing 911 with shaking hands that weren't entirely steady from fear but from the adrenaline of watching my plan unfold. My husband collapsed. I said into the phone, my voice breaking. "Please, we need an ambulance." He's not responding. As paramedics rushed in 10 minutes later, as they loaded Daniel's unconscious body onto a gurney, as police officers began asking questions, I felt the weight of what I'd done settling over me. He drugged himself with his own poison meant for me. And now, maybe finally, someone would believe me. But as the ambulance doors closed and the sirens faded into the night, I caught my reflection in the darkened window. For just a moment, I barely recognized the woman staring back at me, harder, colder, capable of things I'd never imagined. Maybe now they'll believe me, I whispered to my reflection. And I wasn't sure if I felt triumphant or terrified. The dining room felt like a crime scene. Broken glass glittered on the hardwood floor, reflecting the overhead lights in 1,000 tiny fragments. Maggie stood pressed against the wall, her hand over her mouth, eyes wide with shock. Tom paced near the window, running his hands through his hair repeatedly. And I sat at the table, staring at the empty chair where Daniel had been moments before, my hands folded calmly in my lap. The calm was a lie. Inside, I was screaming, "Laura." Maggie's voice cut through the silence. "What just happened?" "I don't know," I said, and it was partially true. I'd switched the glasses, yes, but I hadn't known exactly what he'd put in mine or how it would affect him. He just collapsed. 2 police officers arrived before the ambulance was even out of sight. Officer Chin, young and methodical, and Detective Harris, older with tired eyes that had seen too much. They asked us to walk them through the evening. I explained the dinner invitation, the reconciliation attempt, the sudden collapse. And you didn't notice anything unusual before he fell? Detective Harris asked, his pen poised over a small notebook. He seemed fine. Normal. We were just talking and then I let my voice break, covered my face with my hands. It wasn't entirely an act. The enormity of what had happened was starting to sink in. 3 hours later, I sat alone in the emergency room waiting area, fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. A doctor approached, his face professionally neutral. Mrs. Morris? I stood quickly. Is he? Your husband is stable. Unconscious, but stable. He paused, choosing his words carefully. We found significant traces of sedatives in his system. Rohypnol, specifically. Were you aware of any medication he was taking? The question hung in the air like an accusation.
No. No.
His expression shifted slightly, became more scrutinizing. The levels were quite high. Dangerous, actually. Do you have any idea how this could have happened? I don't understand. Daniel doesn't take sleeping pills or anything like that. But even as I said it, I could see doubt forming in the doctor's eyes. The wife. It's always the wife, isn't it? Especially when the husband collapses mysteriously at a dinner she hosted. Detective Harris appeared in the doorway behind the doctor. Mrs. Morris, I'm going to need you to come down to the station and answer some more questions. The interrogation room was exactly like the ones on TV. Gray walls, metal table, uncomfortable chairs, and a mirror that was obviously two-way glass. Harris sat across from me, a recorder between us, and asked me to recount everything again.
And again.
Each time, listening for inconsistencies. Tell me about your marriage, he said finally.
So I did.
I told him everything, the grogginess, the memory lapses, the vials with my name, the forged power of attorney, the GPS tracker. I explained about the smartwatch footage that had been deleted, the financial documents, the systematic drugging. My voice grew stronger as I spoke, fueled by months of suppressed fear and rage. Harris listened, his expression unreadable. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair. That's quite a story, Mrs. Morris. It's not a story. It's what happened. But you don't have proof. The footage is gone, you say. The vials, do you still have them? My stomach dropped. I'd photographed them, but left them in place. They're in his drawer. At home. We'll check. But right now, all we know for certain is that your husband collapsed after drinking wine at your dinner party, and he has dangerous levels of sedatives in his system.
He paused.
That doesn't look good for you. He was drugging me, I said, my voice rising. For months. Check the pharmacy records. Check Franklin's. They'll tell you. We will. But, Mrs. Morris, I need you to understand how this appears. From where I'm sitting, you look like someone with motive and opportunity. They let me go home that night, but the suspicion followed me like a shadow. The next morning, police arrived with a search warrant. I watched from the porch as they went through my house, my belongings, my life. When they emerged, one officer held up an evidence bag containing a prescription bottle. Found this in your dresser drawer, he said to Harris. Rohypnol, prescribed to Laura Morris. My blood ran cold. That's not mine. I've never seen that before. But I could see it in their faces. They didn't believe me. Daniel had planted it, probably weeks ago, one more piece in his elaborate frame. And I'd walked right into his trap. I spent that night in a holding cell, sitting on a thin mattress, staring at gray concrete walls. This was it. He'd won. Even unconscious in a hospital bed, Daniel had orchestrated everything so perfectly that I'd become the villain in my own story. Morning came with the sound of metal doors clanging. A guard led me to a visitation room where Maggie sat waiting, her face pale and drawn. She slid something across the table. A flash drive. You said you had backups, she said quietly. I checked your old phone last night, the one you kept at my place. The cloud synced automatically to it. Everything's still there. Hope flared in my chest, painful and bright. The smartwatch footage? She nodded. All of it. Him with the syringe, the phone call, everything. 2 hours later, Detective Harris sat in a conference room reviewing the footage on a laptop, his expression darkening with each passing second. When Daniels whispered words, "She's almost ready. Soon she won't remember anything," played through the speakers, Harris looked up at me with something like apology in his eyes. "This changes everything," he said quietly. Within hours, they'd obtained a warrant for Daniel's storage unit, something I hadn't even known existed. I rode with Harris to the facility, a gray building on the edge of town. Inside Unit 247, they found boxes upon boxes of files. Medical records, photographs, false identity documents. But not just mine. There were files for other women. Clara Jennings, whose name I'd seen in Daniel's documents at home. Emily Parsons. Maria Chun. Each file contained similar documentation, forged medical assessments, insurance policies, carefully constructed paper trails toward institutionalization or worse. "How many?" I whispered, staring at the rows of boxes. "We're still counting," Harris said grimly. "But it looks like he's been doing this for years." Among the files was a manila envelope marked Project Memory Reset. Inside, detailed notes described Daniel's theories about controlling memory through systematic sedative cycles. Charts tracked dosages, memory retention, behavioral changes. It read like a scientific experiment, cold and clinical. And there were photos. Clara at a lakeside cabin, smiling and unaware. Emily at a coffee shop, reading a book. Maria walking her dog. Each woman captured in moments of normalcy before Daniel had systematically dismantled their lives. He was experimenting on them, I said, my voice hollow. We were all just experiments to him. The GPS coordinates in one file led us to a remote cabin 3 hours north. The place reeked of chemicals and decay. Inside, Harris's team found hospital-grade equipment, syringes, monitors, restraints, and storage containers filled with blood samples, each labeled with names and dates. My name was on 5 of them, dated over the past 3 months. In a locked cabinet, they found journals, Daniel's personal notes describing each subject's progress. Clara had resisted treatment and required higher doses. Emily had shown promising memory suppression. Maria had unfortunately expired due to complications. Expired. Like she was a damn product. I read my own entry, hands shaking. Subject L shows excellent adaptation to treatment. Memory integration successful. Ready for phase 2. Complete personality restructuring. He hadn't just wanted to drug me. He'd wanted to erase who I was entirely and rebuild me into something else. Someone compliant. Someone who would never question him. The call came 2 days later while I was staying at Maggie's house, unable to return to a home that felt contaminated by Daniel's presence. "Mrs. Morris? This is Mercy Hospital. Your husband is awake." My mouth went dry. Awake. "Yes, he's been asking for you. Would you like to visit?" Every instinct screamed no. But I needed to see him. Needed to look into the eyes of the monster I'd married and understand what I'd been living with all this time. The hospital room was private, expensive. Daniel lay propped against white pillows, IVs snaking from his arms, monitors beeping steadily. When I entered, his eyes tracked to me with an alertness that belied his weakened state. "Laura." His voice was raspy but clear. "You shouldn't have called the ambulance." Not, "Thank you for saving my life." Not what happened.
Just that flat statement of fact.
What was I supposed to do? I kept my distance, staying near the door. "Let you die." A faint smile crossed his lips. "You ruined everything." "What did you do to Clara Jennings?" The question hung between us. Daniel's smile widened slightly, and for the first time since I'd known him, the mask dropped completely. What looked back at me wasn't human. It was something cold and calculating, something that saw people as variables in an equation. "You mean Clara Jennings?" he said softly. "She was overthinking too. Always questioning, always suspicious. Some people can't just accept help when it's offered." "Help? You were killing her." I was perfecting a process. She was an unfortunate setback, but the data was invaluable. He shifted slightly, wincing. "You were supposed to be different, Laura. You were supposed to be my masterpiece." I felt bile rise in my throat. "You're insane."
No.
I'm a scientist. I saw potential where others saw limitations. The human mind is malleable, Laura. Memory, personality, identity, all of it can be shaped, controlled, improved. I was giving you a gift. A gift? You were erasing me. I was removing your flaws. Your anxiety, your doubts, your tedious need to question everything. I was creating someone perfect. His eyes glittered with something like pride. And I nearly succeeded. Detective Harris entered before I could respond, followed by two uniformed officers. Daniel's expression shifted immediately, the mask sliding back into place, his voice becoming pained and confused. Detective, thank God. My wife, she's been acting so strangely. I think she's the one who... Save it, Mr. Morris. Harris's voice was ice. We found your storage unit. We found the cabin. We know about Clara Jennings, Emily Parsons, Maria Chun, and God knows how many others. For a moment, Daniel's facade cracked again, rage flashing across his features. Then he settled back against the pillows, and when he spoke, his voice was calm. I want my lawyer. The media descended like vultures. By the next morning, news vans lined the street outside Maggie's house. My phone rang constantly, reporters wanting interviews, true crime podcasters requesting statements, strangers offering sympathy or accusations in equal measure. The trial preparation consumed months. Daniel's lawyers painted him as a misunderstood medical researcher, someone whose methods were unconventional, but whose intentions were pure. They suggested I was an unreliable narrator, someone with genuine mental health issues that Daniel had been trying to treat. When I took the stand, I relived every terrifying detail. The grogginess, the memory gaps, finding the syringe, the smartwatch footage. Each revelation chipped away at the defense's narrative, but Daniel's lawyer was skilled at creating doubt. Isn't it true, Mrs. Morris, that you've struggled with anxiety for years? Yes, but... And that you've had difficulty distinguishing between actual events and anxious thoughts? That's not what. You admit you switched your husband's wine glass with yours at dinner, correct? Because he drugged mine. Or so you believed. But couldn't it be that your anxiety caused you to act irrationally? It went on like that for hours, days. They tried to turn my survival into evidence of guilt. But then Maggie testified. She described the call where I'd told her about the sedatives, her concern, the deterioration she'd witnessed. And she played the smartwatch footage for the court. Daniel's voice filled the courtroom. She's almost ready. Soon she won't remember anything. The jury watched him inject something into my water glass, heard him make that phone call. When the video ended, several jurors were openly staring at Daniel with revulsion. The nurse from Daniel's former clinic testified next, voice shaking. He was conducting unauthorized experiments with memory inhibitors. I saw him falsifying records, accessing patient files. I was too scared to report it. Then came the forensic evidence from the cabin, blood samples, restraint marks on the equipment, traces of various sedatives. The medical examiner testified about Clara Jennings's cause of death, overdose of barbiturates combined with rohypnol. In my professional opinion, he said, this was not accidental. The combination and dosage were deliberately calculated. When Daniel finally took the stand, his lawyers advised him to maintain the concerned husband persona. But under cross-examination, his composure cracked. The prosecutor pushed and pushed, questioning his medical credentials, his research methods, his relationship with each victim. You call them subjects in your notes, the prosecutor said. Not patients.
Not people. Subjects.
As if they were laboratory animals. That's a mischaracterization. You wrote, and I quote, Subject L shows excellent adaptation to treatment. Subject L is your wife, Mr. Morris. The woman you swore to love and protect. I was trying to help her. By erasing her memory? By controlling every aspect of her life? By building a legal case to have her institutionalized? She needed structure. She needed guidance. The experiments were going to change everything. Daniel's voice rose, his face flushing. Don't you understand? I was on the verge of a breakthrough. Memory isn't sacred. It's malleable. Controllable. I could have helped thousands of people, but he pointed at me, his hand shaking with rage. She ruined years of research. The courtroom fell silent. His lawyer looked stricken. The prosecutor smiled grimly. So, you admit you were conducting experiments on your wife without her consent. Daniel seemed to realize what he'd said, but it was too late. The mask had shattered completely, revealing the cold calculation beneath. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. When they returned, the forewoman's voice was clear and firm. Guilty on all counts. Daniel was sentenced to life imprisonment without possibility of parole. As they led him away, he looked back at me one final time. His expression held no remorse, no recognition of wrongdoing, only frustration, as if I were a failed experiment that had disappointed him. I should have felt relief. Instead, I felt hollow. The house stood empty when I finally returned to it, dust motes dancing in afternoon sunlight that felt too cheerful for the space. Every room held memories that were now suspect, which moments had been real and which had been manipulated. Had Daniel ever truly loved me, or had I simply been an interesting variable from the start? The first week back, I poured out all the tea leaves, every box and tin. They went into the garbage with a finality that should have felt cathartic, but just felt sad. I stripped the bed where I'd pretended to sleep while he'd drugged my water. I removed every tie from his drawer. But peace didn't come. I'd wake at 2 a.m., heart pounding, convinced I heard his footsteps in the hall. The metallic taste in my mouth would return phantom-like, making me gag even though I'd drunk only water. Some nights I'd check the locks 5, 6, 7 times, knowing intellectually that Daniel was in prison, but unable to convince my body it was safe. Maggie stayed with me as much as she could, but she had her own life to return to. And I needed to learn to exist in this house, my house now, without fear. 6 weeks after the sentencing, a letter arrived from the state correctional facility. My hands shook as I opened it, recognizing Daniel's precise handwriting immediately. Laura, you still don't understand why I did it. You think this was about control, about hurting you. But that's because you're still thinking with the limited perspective I was trying to help you overcome. Check the envelope lining. You were always meant to be part of something greater. With trembling fingers, I felt along the envelope's interior. Something was wedged in the seam, a photograph, old and creased. When I pulled it free, my breath caught. It showed me unconscious on a hospital bed, medical equipment surrounding me, bandages wrapped around my head. The date stamp in the corner read 7 years ago, before I'd ever met Daniel socially. Before our chance encounter at the coffee shop. Before everything. On the back, in faded ink, subject 0, baseline established. The room spun. I drove to Mercy Hospital in a daze, the photograph clutched in my hand. At the medical records department, I requested files from 7 years ago under my name. That would be from before the system digitized. The clerk said, "Let me check archives." She returned with a thin file marked Morris, Laura, emergency admission. Inside, reports documented a car accident on Highway 49, head trauma, temporary amnesia, 3-week hospital stay. My treating physician, Dr. Daniel Morris. The crash. I remembered the crash, remembered waking up confused, remembered the long recovery. But I'd met Daniel 2 years later, I'd thought. Our chance meeting at Café Luna, where he'd complimented my book choice and asked if he could join me. Our first date at the Italian restaurant. The proposal at the Botanical Gardens. All of it planned. All of it staged. My hands shook as I read further. Discharge notes mentioned persistent memory gaps regarding the weeks before accident and patient advised to follow up with psychiatry for trauma processing. But I'd never had those follow-ups. Daniel had been my only follow-up. At the library, I searched for more information about my past, using the name on my driver's license. What I found made my blood run cold. 7 years ago, Laura Morris had worked as a research assistant at Whitmore Medical Center. Her supervisor, Dr. Daniel Morris. And according to archived employee newsletters, she'd filed a complaint with the ethics board about unauthorized human trials just weeks before her accident. The crash hadn't been random. He tried to kill me, failed, and then used my amnesia as an opportunity to recreate me as something else entirely. I found my old apartment building, climbed stairs to the third floor, knocked on a door that might hold answers. An elderly woman opened it, squinting at me suspiciously. "Can I help you? I used to live here. 7 years ago. I'm trying to remember." Her expression shifted to recognition and sadness. "Laura Carter? My God. We thought, after the accident, you disappeared. Your family came looking for you." "Carter. Not Morris. Carter. My family. Your sister called for months. Left her number. Hold on." She returned with a scrap of paper bearing a phone number and a name. Amanda Carter. That night, from Maggie's house, because I couldn't face making this call from Daniel's home, I dialed the number. It rang 3 times before a woman answered. "Hello. Hi, my name is Laura. I think I might be your sister." The silence stretched so long I thought she'd hung up. Then, "Lena? What? Your name is Lena. Lena Carter. Where have you been?" My name wasn't Laura. I wasn't who I thought I was. Daniel had taken everything, not just my memory, not just my agency, but my actual identity. Amanda explained through tears that after my accident, I disappeared from the hospital during my recovery. The family had filed missing persons reports, hired investigators, searched for years. Eventually, they'd been told I probably didn't want to be found, that trauma victims sometimes start over. "But we never stopped looking," she said. "Mom still sets a place for you at Christmas. Just in case." I had a mother, a sister, a whole identity that Daniel had stolen and replaced with his construction. The next time I visited him in prison, I sat behind the plexiglass partition and stared at the man who'd reshaped my entire existence. "You look different," he said, studying me. "More awake." "My name is Lena Carter," I said quietly. "You stole 7 years of my life." "I gave you a new life," he corrected. "The old one was trying to destroy me. I simply repurposed you. You're a monster." "I'm a visionary. You were subject 0, the proof of concept. If you'd just cooperated, imagine what we could have accomplished together." He leaned forward, eyes bright with the same fervor I'd seen during his courtroom outburst. "I could have helped so many people forget their traumas, their pain. You were the beginning of something revolutionary. I was a person whose life you destroyed because I tried to expose you. And now you've succeeded in exposing me." He smiled, cold and calculating. "But tell me, Lena, how much of who you are now is really you, and how much is what I made you? Those 7 years shaped you. The careful wife, the anxious woman, the person who questions everything. I created all of that. Even now, everything you think and feel exists because I put it there." The words hit like physical blows. How much of my personality was authentic, and how much was Daniel's programming? Would I ever know? "You're wrong," I said, surprised by the steadiness in my voice. "You tried to erase me, but I'm still here. Lena is still here. And she's the one who destroyed everything you built." His smile faltered for the first time. "Good." The process of reclaiming my identity took months. Legal name change, recover documents, therapy sessions where I tried to untangle Lena from Laura and found they were both somehow me now. The girl who'd worked at Whitmore Medical and the woman who'd survived Daniel's experiments had merged into someone new, someone neither of them could have imagined becoming. My sister Amanda came to visit, bringing photos of a life I didn't remember. A childhood in Sacramento. College at Berkeley. Our father's funeral, where teenage me had read a poem. I studied these images of Lena Carter like artifacts from an archaeological dig, trying to excavate my own past. "You are so confident," Amanda said, pointing to a photo of me presenting research at a conference. "That's what I remember most. You were fearless." I'd been fearless once. Daniel had spent years making me afraid. Detective Harris helped me access the sealed files from Whitmore Medical, Daniel's illegal research facility, before he'd moved to more covert operations. The ethics complained I'd filed detailed unauthorized drug trials, falsified consent forms, and patient deaths that had been covered up. "You were going to blow the whistle," Harris explained. He knew it would end his career, possibly lead to criminal charges. So he tried to eliminate the problem. The car accident hadn't been random. Security footage from that night, preserved in police evidence, showed my vehicle had been tampered with, brake lines cut, just enough to cause failure on a highway curve.
Y de surviva.
And Daniel, improvising, had used my amnesia to transform his problem into his greatest experiment. In his abandoned research clinic, the facility they'd found during the investigation, I walked through sterile rooms that smelled of disinfectant and decay. Preserved data logs showed my name. Subject 0/patient 001. Lena Carter. The entries documented every phase of my transformation. Day 1. Subject shows residual memory of accident, but significant gaps in personal history. Beginning identity reconstruction protocols. Day 47. Subject responds to name, Laura, without hesitation. Previous identity successfully suppressed. Month 6. Released to supervised environment. Will maintain contact under guise of social relationship. He documented our entire courtship, each chance encounter, each conversation designed to reinforce my false identity, each moment I'd thought was genuine love. It had all been part of the experiment. In a locked drawer, I found my old journal, Lena's journal, dated from before the accident. The entries revealed a passionate researcher who'd loved her work, who'd been dating someone named Marcus, who'd planned to expose Daniel's violations no matter the cost. He's hurting people, one entry read. I have evidence. Tomorrow I'm going to the board. Marcus thinks I should wait, get more proof, but how many more patients have to suffer? The next entry never came. That was the night of the accident. I sat on the floor of that abandoned clinic, surrounded by evidence of my stolen life, and felt something shift inside me. Not grief exactly, but a strange kind of clarity. Daniel had tried to erase Lena Carter. Instead, he'd created someone stronger, someone who'd survived his worst, and still came out fighting. Before leaving, I took the data logs. Evidence for myself, proof that I had existed before Daniel, that my memories and my identity were real, even if compromised. My final visit to the prison came 6 months after his sentencing. The guards led me to the visitation room where Daniel waited, looking older now, diminished by confinement. I wondered when you'd come, he said. Come to gloat. No. I sat down, met his eyes without flinching. I came to tell you that you failed. Failed? I reshaped your entire. You tried to erase Lena Carter. You tried to create a compliant wife named Laura Morris. Instead, you created someone who's both and neither, someone who understands manipulation because she survived yours. Someone who'll spend the rest of her life helping other victims like Clara and Emily and Maria. His expression hardened. How noble. Playing the hero. Not a hero. Just someone who refuses to let you win. I leaned forward. You wanted to know if your programming worked? If Laura was real, or if Lena survived. The answer is both. I'm both. And that's something you could never understand, that people aren't experiments. We're not variables to control. We adapt. We survive. We become more than you could ever make us. I stood to leave, but he spoke again, voice desperate. Wait. You have to understand, the research was groundbreaking. If you'd just cooperated. Goodbye, Daniel. Walking out of that prison, I felt lighter than I had in years. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. I drove to the lakeside cabin from the photos, Clara's cabin, now seized by the state, but still standing empty. Standing on the dock, I pulled the syringe from my pocket, the one I'd found in Daniel's drawer so many months ago, kept as evidence, now serving a different purpose. I dropped it into the water, watching ripples spread across the still surface. Each circle expanding, then fading, then disappearing entirely. In my car, I found the audio file Harris had given me. Daniel's final logged entry, recorded the day before his arrest. Subject L shows persistent resistance to conditioning. Hypothesis: pain and trauma create stronger memory anchors than positive reinforcement. Conclusion: erase the pain, and you erase the person. His voice, clinical and cold, echoed in the quiet car. Then I deleted the file. I didn't need to hear his theories anymore. That evening, I met Amanda for dinner. We talked about our mother, about memories Amanda shared that I couldn't recall, about slowly rebuilding what had been broken. When she asked if I'd ever really be Lena again, I considered the question carefully. No, I said finally. I'll never be exactly who I was. But I'm okay with that. The person I am now survived something Lena couldn't have imagined. And Laura, the version of me Daniel created, she taught me things too. How to be cautious. How to document everything. How to fight back when someone tries to control you. So, who are you? Amanda asked gently. I'm both. I'm neither. I'm whoever I choose to be now. I smiled, surprised to find it genuine. And that's enough. As dawn broke the next morning, I sat on my porch, not Daniel's porch, but mine, legally and completely. The house had been deep cleaned, redecorated, transformed from a prison into something that could be a home. Birds sang in the garden. Coffee steamed in my favorite mug. And for the first time in longer than I could remember, I felt awake. He tried to make me forget who I was. I whispered to the quiet morning. The words felt like a spell, an incantation of reclamation. But he only reminded me who I'll never be again. A victim. An experiment. A woman who doesn't question what doesn't feel right. I thought of Clara and Emily and Maria, women who hadn't survived Daniel's experiments. Women whose families still grieved them. I testified at the trial on their behalf, given voice to their stolen stories. Now, I plan to do more. That afternoon, I made calls to advocacy groups, victim services, support networks for survivors of psychological abuse. My story could help others recognize the signs, escape before it was too late. Lena had wanted to expose Daniel's crimes 7 years ago. Now, finally, I had succeeded. The sound of water lapping against the shore played in my memory. The lake, the cabin, the moment I'd let go of that syringe. It felt symbolic of more than just evidence discarded. It felt like releasing the parts of both Lena and Laura that Daniel had poisoned, keeping only what I chose to carry forward. My phone buzzed with a text from Maggie. Lunch tomorrow? Want to hear about your new project? Yes, I typed back. I have a lot to tell you. As I hit send, I caught my reflection in the window, a woman I was still getting to know, still learning to trust. But unlike the stranger I'd seen in the mirror during Daniel's gaslighting, this woman looked back at me with clear eyes and steady purpose. The scars would always be there. Some memories would never return. Some wounds would never fully heal. But I was free. Free to remember and free to forget, free to choose who I became next. And that freedom, hard-won and precious, was mine alone. The screen faded, not to black, but to morning light, signaling the end of control and the beginning of something Daniel could never have predicted, a life reclaimed, a woman reborn, and the quiet, powerful truth that some things, some people, refuse to be erased. If someone you trusted completely turned out to be systematically erasing who you are, would you even recognize the signs before it was too late? Like this video if this story got your heart racing, subscribe for more shocking true stories, and let me know in the comments. Have you ever felt like someone was gaslighting you?